I'm Carl. I'm the founder of crowdsourcing.org. I've been meeting various groups across Europe over the last few weeks. The interest in crowdsourcing and crowdfunding as a business model is very, very interesting in the way that organizations and individuals are trying to learn more about this model regarding how to deploy it, what the best practices are, and really what is it. I'm very pleased to be part of this international launch today of the Symbid platform. I started observing maybe 3 years ago that crowdsourcing and crowdfunding were very unique models. There's been a history of open collaboration and the idea of groups of people forming to tackle challenges or to invent and to innovate is not new. The earliest example that is written about is the 1714 Longitudinal Prize, where a group of seamen and merchants in the UK became very distressed at the amount of loss of seamen and merchants each year. So they took a petition to Westminster Palace, and the British government thought that the challenge of providing merchant seamen with the tools and the means to be able to navigate the seas was a feat that was impossible. And it transpired that the son of a carpenter, a chap called Harrison, won the $20,000 prize for creating a marine chronometer that was vacuum sealed. So, you know, open collaboration, competition-based initiatives is not new. You know, there are a number of other examples that follow. The Sydney Opera House in 1955 was a design that was a result of an open competition for a $5,000 prize. So, you know, the innate need for individuals to connect and to participate is something that is sort of inherent within each of us. What's new and what's different about this is the change that's been made possible as a result of the internet. So first of all, obviously the internet provided us with the means to connect, and that allowed us to exchange data. It allowed us to start communicating with people in different ways. On top of the internet, of course, the communication layer became a sort of a social networking layer. And now social networking has become a utility. It's something that we use every day of our lives. It's no longer a fad. It's just a basic means by which we keep in touch with people. Now, connecting and sharing data across the internet is one thing. But a few years ago, a number of different models were emerging, and it was observed that people were congregating for different reasons. They were congregating around different interests, different passions, and they were congregating to be part of that production process. And this is really where we think the beginnings of what we're now defining as a crowdsourcing and crowdfunding model had their origins. So what was different about these online communities was that they had a particular purpose. You know, people were forming in order to be able to either create something. That creation could be a form of production, could be a form of work product, or it could be funding. It could be aggregating funds in order to make a particular venture or project or a business possible. And the other thing that was happening is people were forming in these communities to problem solve. And again, that problem solve could be an idea for an innovation, it could be the resolution of a particular issue. But these models were very, very different. There were a number of characteristics that were deemed consistent with the crowdsourcing and crowdfunding models. One of those characteristics were that any online community was not necessarily by default a crowdsourcing or a crowdfunding community, but one where there was some very specific output that was usually directed either by a primary sponsor, like a leadership team or an individual, or was self-organized by the group themselves. The other thing is that the internet was an inherent component of these new models that were emerging. And the reason being is that, first of all, it required an open call to be made, a request for support, a request for help, or a request for money. And that call needed to be made to a large number of undefined individuals at any one point in time. So although we cite certain examples of open collaboration before the age of the internet, crowdsourcing and crowdfunding in the way that we currently define it is really internet enabled. Now, these online communities were being tapped for a number of different reasons. I mean, either because of their resources. In the case of crowdfunding, it could be their wealth, their money, their available funds. It could be for wisdom, what these people know. It could be for their talent, their capability in terms of how they can apply their expertise. It could be for their time, just simply the ability to fulfill work on somebody else's behalf. Now, crowdsourcing is very, very different as a business model to outsourcing, as an example. With outsourcing, there's a couple of very principles, philosophies of outsourcing, and that is, first of all, it's not open. You define a very specific group of individuals that are responsible for the fulfillment of a given piece of work or working on a particular project. Also, with outsourcing, there is very much the responsibility of that entity having the end-to-end obligation in order to be able to complete that work. With crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, it works in a very different way. First of all, the principle of open participation is inherent. So when you raise money for a project, or when you task a group of people to support you in terms of an initiative, with these models, you are inherently making that call open to as many people as you wish in terms of those that will participate. So with crowdsourcing, there's a couple of very different principles. The first is that it's complete open participation. So if you're raising money through a crowdfunding initiative, you are open inherently to as many people making that choice to invest as you can reach through that platform. Relative to the crowdsourcing of assistance of labor, of support for a piece of work, again, you're disaggregating that piece of work into very, very small parts, and then you're reaggregating that. In the same way that when you raise money for a particular venture, you're asking for multiple, many small donations, which you then aggregate in order to be able to meet your investment challenges. So crowdsourcing is an online distributed model for problem solving and production. And we think about that in the context of crowdfunding. The production can either be work product or it can be money that you raise. So we define 7 fundamental different crowdsourcing models. One of those models is in the area of what we call civic engagement. So it's communities that are participating for reason of a passion or a belief, and typically they're non-monetary, non-profit projects and initiatives. There's the area of collective creativity, which is people participating in design. It could be design around graphics, it could be design around apparel, furniture, anything of that nature. Then there's the collective knowledge, so it's people organizing the collection and sorting and organization of knowledge artifacts. There's the whole area of cloud labor, which is really connecting with virtual on-demand pools of labor and talent. Open innovation, which is communities that form around the ideation or development of ideas into business proposals and then ultimately projects. And then there's the area of crowdfunding. So related to crowdfunding, I mean, we've been watching this for some time. The idea of raising money through online platforms isn't new. I mean, there have been many charitable organisations that have been raising funds for many years through this means. What is new is the sort of non-profit applications of these models, and we're seeing probably 2 or 3 a week now of these crowdfunding models that are coming online. And obviously, people are very aware of models such as Kickstarter, and there are very many of these models that are really sort of platforms for donations and for sponsorship. And they're fun and they're interesting, and it allows people to ask for money for favorite causes, and typically the commitment, the contract between somebody providing the funds and the person asking for the money is really just a promise to fulfill the goal of the project, and maybe there's some trade in terms of some tokens, maybe some souvenirs and some mementos, and these are interesting, and they're giving lots of people the opportunity to maybe raise funds for doing things that otherwise weren't possible. But they're not really very fundamental in terms of the change that it might have on the capital market. So obviously, the big issue within the capital markets is the funding, or the fact that a lot of the funding is out of reach of small entrepreneurs. So, in the same way that we have this desire to contribute and participate in these production models, we also want to produce and we also want to participate in these businesses in the same way. There are many entrepreneurs who are looking to connect with money and with people in different ways. The real future in terms of potentially the way that it might change the business model and the construct is really in equity-based crowdfunding platforms. And obviously there's been a lot of attention in the US relative to the SEC and the way that the market and the systems are regulated. And of course, leave it to the Dutch again to be one of the first in terms of challenging this model and working out a framework that makes this possible. I've been looking at Symbid now for about a year. I know it's been live over the last 6 or so maybe 8 weeks, but it has a very interesting model in terms of the ability to connect entrepreneurs with investors in a way that is regulated and provides tremendous scope for new businesses, both from the perspective of the entrepreneurs in the businesses and the people that wish to participate and get involved in those businesses in different ways. So it enables people to get involved in these businesses in very different ways. Now, the interesting thing is the other types of crowdfunding platforms really don't align the people asking for the money with the people making the donations and investments, etc. If you look at the models that involve a form of lending, there are clearly lots of sort of philanthropic type of platforms like Kiva, where people do expect to get a rate of return, but the motivations and the drivers here are really to support a passion or a belief that is clearly very important to the investor. In those types of situations, if you apply that to a commercial, for-profit type of venture, burdening a young company with a tremendous debt before it's even out of the gate does nothing in terms of aligning the investors with that entrepreneur's goals and objectives. If you're an investor and you're doing it from the perspective of just looking for a rate of return, you don't, clearly you care about the security of your money. You clearly care about receiving that level of interest and that rate of return. But that becomes the overarching driver for you in terms of, really what the reason you want that business to succeed is you want that interest back. Now, if you take an investment based on a level of risk and an investment in the future success of that business, and you take an equity position, then there's much more alignment in terms of the future and the prospects of that business. This way, obviously, not only do you get the funds as an entrepreneur to fund your venture and fund your vehicle, but you have a group of investors that are wedded to your success as a business. So the community of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding professionals internationally in certain countries, I know in Brazil, in the US, certainly in the UK, and further afield as well, are very interested in what's happening in Holland regarding the success that we hope Symbid has, not only within its local market but internationally. Quite often, one of the beauties of crowdsourcing is that quite often change comes from outside the traditional boundaries of your organization, or in this instance, your country. As Symbid's model goes international, we're pretty sure that with success it will create a lot of debate and challenge, and hopefully will have a benefit not only for the people raising money through the platform, but also the ramifications in terms of changing the way that the capital markets are restructured to embrace the opportunity for future crowdfunding business models.